I've got a scary amount of retro modding news to go over, so let's get started. So the Nintendo Switch expansion pack came out last week, and Twitter is on fire. I saw this image from Stop Skeletons from Fighting, but I think it's from a Ocarina of Time speedrunner. They got to this part in Ocarina of Time where they were fighting Dark Link, and they noticed that the fog was not there, and the water texture looks all weird. So clearly something is wrong with the emulator that Nintendo is using for this NSO expansion pack. I've heard that Genesis games work fine, but the N64 emulation leaves a lot to be desired. A bunch of YouTubers did videos about this, like Modern Vintage Gamer, and I think even Nate the Hate did one, just talking about the general latency, and there was even some multiplayer lag when you can play with your friends. There was some latency added there. So check out this Modern Vintage Gamer video for some more details about that. But it's kind of sad for the $30 extra you have to pay for this expansion pack that the performance is not really that great. But on a similar note, the N64 and Genesis controllers that came out with the expansion pack were starting to get in people's hands this week. I saw this quote tweet from Rocker Gaming that looked at the control stick for the N64, and I guess it's supposed to be different than the normal N64. It looks like this one uses potentiometers instead of the optical switches that the original N64 controller had. And it even says that this controller was a significant redesign, and it doesn't look like anything is compatible with the new controller for the Switch and the original controller. I ordered one of each, the Genesis and N64 controllers, so I'm kind of excited to get them in my hands to see how they feel. And I'm really hoping that there's going to be some kind of an adapter, maybe from 8BitDo, that allows you to use those N64 controllers on a real N64. Fraggle Rock has been experimenting with some 3D printed replacement parts for old consoles. In this case, he made a Sega CD Model 2 spindle. He reproduced the spindle and printed it in both an FDM printer as well as a resin printer. And there's even some footage on Twitter of him actually using it with the game. So this is kind of exciting, and we live in a really cool time where people can make these models for replacement parts and just put them on somewhere like Thingiverse so that you can download them and just print them yourself. It would be really cool if we started a console by console sort of repository of these replacement parts. As these consoles get older, there's going to be a lot of broken parts, and it would be really cool to just be able to 3D print them yourself, and off you go, you'll have a working console again. Shout out to Jeff Chen, who has another project here, which is this RetroTink 5X Pro SCART dock. It's not just this 3D printed stand, it also converts that SCART to different formats. So far he's released a VGA one, as well as one that is designed for BNC connectors. Now these don't actually convert any of the signals. I believe that the BNC is just a straight RGB signal. And don't quote me, but I think that this VGA is not real VGA, it's just RGB through the VGA cable. He says he uses his VGA RGB pinout standard, which he's explained in the past where he's used off-the-shelf VGA cables to just extend RGB signals so that he doesn't have to buy expensive custom RGB cables. Actually, here's some pictures of the dongles that he made for the other end of that cable. So these plug into the console, and then using a VGA and an audio cable, you can connect that to that RetroTink 5X dock. So this is a cool project, and he's released all the files if you want to build one of these yourself. Grant Kirkhope, who is the original composer to the Banjo-Kazooie games, actually released a Banjo-Kazooie remix album called Rejiggied, and it is absolutely awesome. I've listened to this whole thing a bunch of times already while I was at work. It's more of like a techno theme, kind of like a modern representation of these classic songs, but man, this is a really good remix album. I mean, almost every song on this album I love a lot. So if you're anything like me and you love video game music, then you're really gonna like this album. If you've been following me on Twitter, you've seen that I've talked about this Wii handheld project called the Ashida. I got the idea to try to build one of those after I saw this Linus Tech Tips video of them building a G-Boy. The G-Boy is basically the same type of mod as the Ashida Wii handheld, but it's in this like original Game Boy form factor. Anyways, I tried to find this G-Boy kit that they were talking about in this video, and I can't find it anywhere, and that's what actually led me to that other project. Ever since I found out about those portable Wiis, I've been on a tear across the internet looking for weird portable handheld consoles. This one here is from G-Man Mods, who is actually the creator of that G-Boy kit, but it's a portable N64 that looks like a Game Boy SP. And you can use your original cartridges with it. That's super awesome. I think this project is really cool. I don't think this is gonna be a mass-produced kit yet. Hopefully they release something like this, because I would really like to build one of these after I tackle that Wii project. Along the same lines, I found this GBA Slab SP mod, which is basically flattening out a Game Boy SP so that it looks more like a Game Boy Color. Comes in a bunch of different colors, and the cartridge slot is kind of recessed in the back, so it just makes it really ergonomic. So sometime I would like to tackle this mod as well. I'm gonna finish up by talking about this interview that Bob from Retro RGB did with the guys from PixelFX. The main chunk of this video is them talking about every single N64 digital setting, which is actually more interesting than it sounds. Really, you should give this video a watch, because one, I think we should support support retro RGB so he can give us more content like this. And 2, you're gonna miss stuff that you might not know about the N64 digital. They talked about the different scanline settings, and apparently there's some kind of a slot mask, which is not just horizontal scan lines for the N64, but you can actually make those scan lines look whatever you want. You can reproduce the actual subpixels from a CRT. But I do want to talk about some mod announcements that they made in this video. So please, if you haven't watched that video yet, pause this video, go watch that one, and come back so that we can talk about the announcements that they made in that video. I want to go over one thing before we talk about the mods that they kind of confirmed or announced in that video, and that is the PixelFX framework that they talked about. They mentioned that they try to use one common FPGA in all of their digital mods. That way they can have one common code base that they can use on the different consoles. That way they're not reproducing a bunch of code work. That's kind of important because more mods might come out in the future that make use of that code. Now I made a list here of all the mods that they referenced in that video in the order that they referenced them. I think they had already announced the PS2 digital mod, but they mentioned it was going to be delayed. I'm not sure if that means sometime next year or even later, but it's cool that we're going to have finally an HDMI mod for the PlayStation 2. They talked about N64 digital restocks, which are supposed to happen early next year, but that could be as late as the end of next year too. Then another interesting announcement was an update for the DC Digital. This is supposed to be a quote-unquote drop-in replacement for the older DC Digital, but using the new Pixel Framework FPGA stuff. It's only drop in air quotes because you'll have to resolder a couple of wires for the controllers. But you shouldn't have to resolder the flex cable on your Dreamcast. You should just be able to replace the mod and solder those controller wires. They talked about the GC Digital, which we've had a spoiler of before. We saw them talk about a GameCube mod coming soon, and it sounds like it's going to be using that PixelFX framework. They said that the hardware was finalized, but because of the chip shortage, they couldn't build any of these boards yet. They also said that they might be able to create a Wii Digital because the mods are very similar between the GameCube and the Wii. They talked about an Xbox Digital mod, and Dan said that they wanted to try to go to 1440p upscaling. The highest resolution that you can reach in an original Xbox is 720p or 1080i, and they thought that they would be able to upscale that to 1440p. And Revive Retro from my Discord mentioned that in the comments, Dan said that it would not require a mod chip because they would do the upscaling in an FPGA compared to the Xbox HD Plus that uses the Xbox itself to do the upscaling. They talked about possible Saturn, Super Nintendo, and Genesis HDMI mods, but I think those mods might be a little bit different. I don't know if there's access to a digital output from those systems. They talked about having to use the analog video signals and some clock signals from inside the console for those mods. I'm not an electrical engineer, so I can't really speak about what's possible in those systems, but just kind of reiterating what they talked about in the video. Woozle kind of talked about this on Twitter already, but he just restated that Game Boy Advance SP consolizer flex cables, as well as that Neo Geo Pocket Color Flex, they're on their way from the fab so that he can do some more testing. Then lastly, somebody asked him about a DS consolizer, the Nintendo DS, and he said that that would be very complex because you'd have to upscale both of those screens. So I'm not sure if that would ever become a possibility in the future, but that seems like a really interesting mod for me. Leave me a comment below about which one of those PixelFX mods has you most excited. Follow me on Twitter or join my Discord server if you want to share any retro modding news stories with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.